Hey, what's up guys, it's me your boy Urban Caste Kevinish back here with another brand new video and I hope you guys are having a great day. So we are here for the Monza Grand Prix weekend review, so without any further talks, let's get right into the video guys. So talking about the Monza atmosphere itself, well, what to say, it's always a very special venue for F1. I think it's probably one of the top 3 special events or venues that Formula 1 visits in the calendar. I mean, alongside Monaco and obviously the Silverstone Grand Prix. So it's a very special atmosphere because it's home to none other than Ferrari. So there's a lot of expectations going into this weekend for Ferrari. The tifosis have over Ferrari. So whether they delivered or not is something that we have seen, and I have to say, in short words, they really did maximize on their result. I don't think they could have done anything more than that. So good job for Ferrari, because they did not stuff up their pit stop, they did not stuff up the strategy. It was a very smooth sailing weekend for Ferrari, which is very rare to come by for Ferrari. So good job. Well, let's talk about the weekend itself. Well, after a long time, we've had a weekend that is not rain affected, so that is good. And genuinely, I did enjoy the weekend. It was a very smooth sailing one. There was not too many crashes or stuff like that, other than Sergio Perez's crash at Parabolica at FP2 with just 10 minutes to go at FP2 session. So that was the only time I think the red flag was brought out. Other than that, it was a very smooth weekend with not too many issue or chaos on the track. So yep, a smooth weekend, which is good to have. It's a bit refreshing after having such a chaotic weekend at Zandvoort. So now let's start off with Max Verstappen. Well, what to say, a man on a mission. He didn't get pole. Carlos Sainz managed to edge over Max Verstappen, which was good to see. It was good to see Ferrari taking pole at their home turf, because I feel like that's the maximum that they could do this season, considering the kind of form and the pace that both Red Bull and Max Verstappen is operating on. So this is good to see that Ferrari has taken pole. That's like a reward or a treat that Ferrari is giving to the tifosi. So that's good to see. And though not taking pole, he managed to win the race, so good job for that. He has successfully surpassed, or we can say broken, Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 consecutive wins with this Monza Grand Prix victory. He has made 10 wins in a row, which is a record that I don't think anyone will be beating for at least another 10 to 12 years, because it literally took 10 years for someone to come up and beat Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 consecutive wins. It was back in 2013, guys. So this record is so special. It's not something that you can just tally or break every now and then. It's a record that only happens once in a while, because it's not often in Formula 1 that a team is as dominant as they are, like Red Bull is this season in 2023. So yes, kudos to Max. It's incredible consistency and a huge appreciation to Red Bull as well, because it's one thing to have a good driver who can maximize the result, but it's another thing for a team to not mess up and to operate as smoothly as Red Bull has been since pretty much since Abu Dhabi of 2022. So kudos to Red Bull as well. And moving on to his teammate Sergio Perez, well, not the good qualifying, but honestly this is the weekend in which he has been the closest to Max in a while. I think the gap was somewhere around 3.5 tenths, which I don't think is not that big of a deal, considering how big of a deficit he had in the interim period after the Miami Grand Prix weekend. So it's a good resurgence. Other than his crash at FP2, it was a very clean weekend from Sergio Perez. He managed to get past both the Ferraris and the Mercedes of George Russell after qualifying P5, if I'm not wrong, and he fought his way through the field and took P2 home, making it a Red Bull 1-2 at Ferrari soil. which was good to see at the end. on the cool down lap. Both Red Bulls coming in formation into the pit lane was definitely a sight to behold, and he took P2 on merit. So honestly, huge props to Checo, and I hope he can build on this and hopefully finish the season off strong. Moving on to the Ferrari, well, it's a good weekend for them. I feel like they absolutely maximized on the result, and I will absolutely give all the credit to Carlos Sainz. I think this is one of his best weekends that he has had since his move to Ferrari. I mean, taking pole and managing to defend against Max Verstappen on that Red Bull for, I think it was up until lap 15-16 laps, holding off a Red Bull, the RB19 in specific, behind the wheels of Max Verstappen is not easy. And it being especially around a track like Monza with all the tifosi watching you, and specifically the characteristic of the track, which means that Carlos Sainz is the driver who's always punching a hole for Max Verstappen to just easily cruise up to the back of him with the slipstream effect. He managed to do a great defensive job, which meant he managed to give us a very entertaining race to watch for the battle for the race lead for at least 15 laps. I don't think he could have done anything better than that. So huge props to Carlos Sainz. He fought Max Verstappen, he fought Sergio Perez, and towards the end of the race he also had to fight against Charles Leclerc, his own teammate, with a tire that was, really which was really worn out. So huge props to Carlos Sainz to actually get pole for Ferrari and to finish on the podium in P3. So moving on to his teammate Charles Leclerc, well, it's almost like Charles Leclerc is under kind of pressure because in the past 2-3 Grand Prix that we've noticed, Carlos Sainz has been on top of his game. He has pretty much been in a 10th or less, sometimes even less than a 10th closer to Charles Leclerc, and I don't think that is a good sign for Charles Leclerc because he has to be the number one driver for the team. He is the golden boy for that team. He took the place of Sebastian Vettel in 2019 after his performance in 2019. So clearly Ferrari had too much faith in Charles Leclerc to make him the number one driver for the team, even when Sebastian Vettel was in the team for 2020. And so with that kind of backing, it's important for Charles Leclerc to sustain that number one position within the team. He can't give Ferrari second thoughts on whether to give Carlos Sainz an edge. He can't afford to do that. So I feel like there's still somewhere a bit of pressure for Charles Leclerc to perform and to be the number one driver for the team and to bring home the best result for the team. And I think that's what Charles Leclerc was trying to do towards the end of the race, trying to get a pass on Carlos Sainz to take the last podium step so that he wouldn't give any edge to Carlos Sainz. So yes, it was kind of a mixed bag of a weekend for Charles Leclerc. It's a weekend in which I think Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc was pretty much on pace with each other. I mean, the top three drivers of this weekend hands down has to be Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. If you just look at the gap between these three drivers in Q3 on the final lap, you will see that these three were the favorites for the race win for this Grand Prix. So yes, a weekend for Charles Leclerc in which he can be pretty happy because he did not finish too far behind his teammate. I think when both the drivers crossed the finish line, Leclerc just finished a 10th behind Carlos Sainz, so that's not that bad of a result. But I feel like he would want to prove something heading into the Singapore Grand Prix. So let's wait and watch. So moving on to Mercedes, well, George Russell had kind of a silent weekend other than his battle with Checo at the starting stage of the Grand Prix. It was kind of a silent weekend from him. Nothing more notable from his side. He qualified really well to qualify P4 and out-qualifying his teammate, which has not happened all that often this season. So it's good to see that pace from him. But moving on to his teammate Lewis Hamilton though, well, it's kind of a scruffy to a battle-filled Italian Grand Prix from him. it was good to watch Lewis Hamilton because he was going wheel to wheel with a lot of drivers this weekend, with Lando Norris, with Alex Albon, with Oscar Piastri. So it was not an easy Grand Prix for Lewis, but he managed to make it all work. And with the tire deg issue that he was facing, with the tire management, he still managed to finish P6 ahead of Albon and Lando Norris, just behind his teammate George Russell. So all in all, a good weekend from Lewis Hamilton. Getting to see some good moves from him on a very signature corner for him to make pass at turn 1 or turn 2 really. So it was all great, other than his little incident into turn 4, if I'm not wrong, with Oscar Piastri. It was pretty much a flawless weekend from Lewis Hamilton. So moving on to Alex Albon, well, he is doing a brilliant job for Williams, I have to say. He did it again in Monza, like how he did in Zandvoort and Canada, and he actually finished the last year's unfinished business because he was fallen ill, and that's where Nick De Vries actually stepped in for him at the Monza Grand Prix in 2022 to score P9, if I'm not wrong. So yes, he managed to finish the unfinished business that he had around Monza for Williams. And looking at this Grand Prix result from Alex Albon makes me wonder if there was more to take in terms of points from last year's Monza Grand Prix as well. I feel like he would have done a little bit better, but I think it's just what if kind of a situation. We don't really know an answer because, I mean, obviously it did not exist. That's not a reality. But moving on to his teammate Logan Sargent though, well, I think he's in a bit of pressure because he did not qualify well. He got knocked out in Q2. He qualified P15 and finished race P13 in a Williams around Monza, and I don't think that's a good result for Williams. I feel like he should have been able to make a few or a couple of positions, or at least to finish P10. I think P10 was clearly on the cards for that Williams car, and a driver who is a bit on pace with Alex would at least be able to do that for Williams. So I think he is under pressure a bit, and I think it's rightfully so, and he needs to deliver a good weekend for the team, because right now Alex Albon is single-handedly the only driver to score points for the team, and the team is standing P7 in the Constructors' Championship, if I'm not wrong, and it's all because of Alex Albon, and there is zero contribution from the other side of the garage. So there is a bit of pressure on Logan Sargent, and I don't think he can use the excuse of being a rookie anymore, because we're already a handful of races into the season, and he has had experience in a Formula 1 car, so it's not like he's in his third race or fourth race in his rookie season. So yes, I hope he gets a good result before the end of the season, or I genuinely see someone taking up Logan Sargent's seat for next year. Moving on to McLaren, well, the McLaren struggles kind of continued. Lando Norris qualified P9 for the race, and Oscar Piastri qualified P7. So Oscar clearly outqualified his teammate around Monza. But in the race, Lando Norris finished 8th behind Alex Albon, and Oscar Piastri had to take a penalty, and especially after his little incident that he had with Lewis Hamilton, left him with a broken front wing. So he had to pit, an unscheduled pit stop, which put him on a back foot. And then I think with his battle with Liam Lawson, he cut the chicane and gained an unfair advantage. I think that's the penalty was for Oscar Piastri, which gave him a 5-second penalty, which meant it demoted him to P12 again. So yes, on the whole, struggle-filled weekend for McLaren. It's not the kind of weekends that McLaren has been having for the past couple of Grand Prix. So it's kind of expected, because a low downforce track is not something that McLaren usually performs good at. We saw it at Spa. In Spa, Oscar Piastri was able to take the sprint race second place finish because it was under wet conditions, and in wet conditions usually a high downforce setup car yields better result than a low downforce car, because you need the grip. But under a dry track, on a low downforce kind of track, you need a car really low drag efficient. So yes, it's kind of expected, and considering that still McLaren scored 4 points out of this weekend is, a good result, and they managed to get both the cars into Q3. So on the whole, a good weekend from McLaren. So now moving on to Aston Martin. Well, it's kind of a disastrous weekend for Aston Martin because they did not do good in qualifying. Fernando Alonso qualified P10, whilst his teammate qualified P20. I mean, that is not a good performance from Lance Stroll, and I feel like Lance Stroll would be the driver who would cost Aston Martin a top 3 finish in the Constructors' Championship this year, because I feel like they have the car this year to finish in the top 3 in the Constructors. If they had 2 quality drivers behind the wheel of the car. Let's forget about Fernando Alonso. He's doing a brilliant job for the team, but I'm talking about Lance Stroll's car. I'm talking about the other side of the garage. I mean, just look at the points difference between both the drivers in the Drivers' Championship. Fernando Alonso is third. He has 170 points for the team, while Lance Stroll has only 47 points and he's 9th in the Drivers' Championship. Fernando Alonso has single-handedly scored 7 podiums for Aston Martin with 3 second place finishes and 4 P3 finishes. Honestly, if there was, let's say, a Sergio Perez or let's say Alexander Albon or even Yuki Tsunoda, let's say, they would have a much stronger championship lead over Ferrari for the fight for P3 in the Constructors. And Ferrari actually overtook Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship for P3 with the Monza Grand Prix result that they pulled out with P3 and P4 finish. So with the kind of points that Aston Martin has lost from Lance Stroll's side of the garage, I feel like they would have a much stronger lead over Ferrari on their fight for P3 in the Constructors' Championship. So yes, I feel like they really need to look at their driver lineup for next year, I hope, because I feel like Lance Stroll would be the bottleneck factor for the team to perform and to get a better Constructors' Championship result. Well, in the race, Fernando Alonso managed to finish 9th, while Lance Stroll finished the race P16. So yeah, make whatever you want out of that. Fernando Alonso is single-handedly doing the best possible damage limitation stint for Aston Martin during the weekend in which their car is not the strongest. And when their car generally has pace, he's absolutely maximizing on his result there as well. So yes, you make whatever you want out of that. And moving on to Alfa Romeo Sauber, well, they have scored a point after a while. I think the last time they scored point was with Zhou Guanyu around the Spanish Grand Prix. So yes, they've scored a point here at Monza with Valtteri Bottas, and I think on the other side of the garage, Zhou Guanyu had a bit of an anonymous weekend. He was pretty much nowhere to be seen. In the qualifying, Zhou Guanyu qualified P16, while Valtteri Bottas qualified P14, and in the race, Valtteri Bottas finished P10 and Zhou Guanyu finished the race P14. Considering the kind of weekends that Alfa Romeo has been having this season, this is a good weekend for them. Well, moving on to AlphaTauri, well, let's start off with Liam Lawson. He has been the most interesting factor for me. If I'm not wrong, he qualified P12 in qualifying for the race, just behind his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. I think the gap between the drivers was nothing more than just a tenth and a half. So a really good and a competitive weekend from Liam Lawson. And honestly, if he continues to do such a good job, I feel like he's proving that he's worthy candidate to be on that AlphaTauri seat for 2024. It's almost like he's making his position to be on the grid inevitable. So it's good to see. And he finished the race P11. So on the whole, a good weekend from AlphaTauri. And considering the situation, it was a good weekend for Liam Lawson at AlphaTauri. I don't think he could have done anything more than that. And for his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, though, he was having a good weekend, qualified P11, but unfortunately his car had to suffer with an engine reliability issue, which see him not start the race because the engine issue actually crept up during the formation lap. So he did not start the race. But up until that point, Yuki Tsunoda was having a pretty solid weekend at Monza. And moving on to Haas now. Well, it's kind of a predictable weekend from them. They were nowhere this weekend. They finished P17 and P18 as the only team to get lapped. It's not that their pace was too bad. Their one lap pace was good. Kevin Magnussen had a disastrous qualifying as usual. He qualified P19, whereas his teammate managed to get into Q2. He qualified P13, but the race pace is where the Haas really underperforms. And Nico Hülkenberg finished the race P17, and Kevin Magnussen finished the race P18, with 2 cars retiring from the race. So not a good weekend from Haas, but it's kind of predicted. And now finally moving on to Alpine. Well, this Italian Grand Prix arguably has to be their roughest weekend of the season so far. After coming off a top 3 finish at Zandvoort, the team is very, very inconsistent, man. Ocon DNF'd from the race, meaning that Gasly was the only Alpine driver to cross the checkered flag in P15. Not a good weekend from them because both the car got knocked out in Q1, and their best finish in this Italian Grand Prix was P15. Not a good outlook considering that they are trying to build their team to make it into a championship contender. And honestly, the only problem that I really see with the Alpine is that it's extremely inconsistent with its performance. In one Grand Prix it's there, and in another it's just nowhere to be seen. So I think finding a good balance and consistency is what Alpine needs right now with their car. And yes, I really hope that they could perform really well at Singapore, considering that it is a track that should suit their car. And yes, that is my review on the drivers. And talking about the race itself, well, the race was good. There were a lot of battles up and down the field, and I feel like the TV direction was the biggest letdown of this weekend. I feel like they could have done a bit of a better job on focusing on all the battles. And another thing that I noticed was that the DRS was, as expected, was not too powerful around this track, considering cars were running a low drag rear wing anyways, which helped for some battles for positions in a very old school F1 way, which was under braking and using the slipstream, which was good to witness. So overall, for the Italian Grand Prix, a non-chaotic weekend, a very smooth, simple, straightforward weekend, though it still had plenty of battles for us to watch. So I would honestly give the Italian Grand Prix a 8 out of 10. I mean, it was not as exciting or unpredictable as the Dutch Grand Prix, but still it definitely had a brilliant racing weekend. It was entertaining to watch, and the podium celebration by itself makes it up for everything. And honestly, a good weekend. Right after the summer break, we are having 2 back-to-back interesting races, and now we are heading to Singapore, which is a track that gives us a lot of chaos and a lot of unpredictable, thrilling results. So let's wait and watch what Singapore has on offer for us, especially with its new reprofiled circuit layout. I'm excited to see how the cars go around the track with this reprofiled structure. So with that being said, I would like to wrap up this review video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe to the Autobahncast YouTube channel if you haven't already. Also hit that bell icon and turn on all notifications so you get notified whenever I upload a brand new video. And let me know in the comment section on what you thought about the Italian Grand Prix weekend. I'm excited to know your thoughts on it as well. It's me, your boy Autobahncast, aka Vinesh, and I'm out. Love you guys. Stay safe. Peace.